Hello again, everybody. It's your old pal Guardian Enzo coming to you as usual live on tape from rainy Kyoto, Japan. Well, it's not usually rainy, but it is today. And it's time for the spring 2023 season preview video. And what a season it is! It's a special one, I think. And if I wanted to, I could probably wax on poetically about this season for a very long time. And though I'm not necessarily good about it, I do try to keep these videos a little bit shorter if possible. So I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. But boy, this is a season. I've sort of taken to unofficially calling 2023 the year manga saved anime. And spring 2023 looks like one of those seasons that comes along not all that often. It has great quality at the top and great depth. It's a hell of a season, at least on paper. And as they say in sports, they don't play the games on paper, but on paper, it looks like an incredible season. There's probably several things I could point to, in a typical season and say this is a special season just because of this, even if it didn't have anything else. And we've got a bunch of those, 4 or 5 of them probably this season where I could say that. So we'll see. It's going to be a major disappointment if this doesn't turn out to be one of the best seasons probably since 2012. It might not. Fall last year looked like it was going to be phenomenal, and it kind of ended up just being pretty good. So we'll see. Generally speaking, the quality of this season is driven by manga adaptations. There are 5 manga being adapted that I follow personally, which is certainly a record. And there are additional very, very well regarded manga adaptations coming from series I'm not necessarily familiar with, but I'm expecting a lot from. So it's a big season in every sense, but especially for someone who has tastes like mine. By my reckoning, we're at 52 shows on the schedule, which is not a crazy huge amount for a spring season in the modern era. It's big, but not outrageous. What's unusual is I'm previewing in my written preview on LIA, which of course will be linked below in the description, previewing 22 shows, which is a very, very high number and almost half of the schedule. I mean, normally my percentage is I end up being interested enough in about 1/3 of them to preview. It's been extremely consistent. Last season, winter 2023, this season as I'm recording still, only 11 shows I previewed, barely a quarter, because it was so heavily driven by light novel adaptations. This time, almost half, which is, if not the highest percentage since I've been doing previews, it's pretty darn close. It's a tremendous season on paper. Lots of great sign-in. Sign-in is definitely the demographic on the rise here. And then the genre that stands out is, for sure, indisputably romantic comedy. Rom-coms and general romance. There's one particular romance series I wouldn't call a rom-com, but generally speaking, romance rom-com is the dominant gender this season. Genre. But there are there's little bits and pieces of all kinds of genres and demographics. There's some shoujo, there's some sports, but it's sign-in and it's rom-com that are in ascendancy, and those are a genre and a demographic that generally tend to produce a lot of series that I quite like. So as a result, it's a season with tremendous potential. As I say, 22 series I'm covering. My highest expectations category is 5 shows, which is a lot. And the mid-table, honestly, I think the mid-table this season is the most impressive part of the season, which is stunning when you consider how good the 5 shows in the highest expectations category, and that there are 5 in that category at all. But the mid-table is really impressive this season. It's even got some sleepers too, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So all things being equal, on paper, it's a phenomenal looking season. So in the interest of at least trying to keep us on a reasonable schedule, I'm going to jump right into the previews here. The first one being one of those things I talked about where if it were the only good thing about the season, it would still be a special season for me, and that's the premiere of BokuYaba, Boku no Kokoro no Yabayatsu, a series that anyone who follows either my website or the YouTube channel knows I'm a huge fan of BokuYaba. I adore it on every level. I've waxed poetical about it on video. I'll link that video in the description. In fact, there are several manga being adapted this season that I've either done videos about or talked about in videos, but that one specifically did a full video about it in the Enzo Loves Manga category. So a great romance, a great comedy, tremendous male and female leads, adapted from the manga by Sakurai, Norio Sakurai, best known for Mitsudomore, but soon to be best known for BokuYaba, I think. We're starting to see a nice spike in manga sales already with the most recent volume that came out. But I think once the anime hits on this, I've always felt that once BokuYaba, the anime came, the manga would explode, just because it's both a terrific series and one which has a lot of elements to it which should make it commercially successful. And even as great as other things are this season coming up, BokuYaba is the one I'm most excited about because it's probably the manga adaptation I'm most excited about in a couple of years for sure. Just because I love, on a personal level, I love the manga that much. The great thing too is that BokuYaba is being adapted by Shinei Studio and the same director that did the Karakai Jozu no Takagi-san adaptation, which is one of the best pure adaptations in a long time because it takes everything about the manga and improves it substantially. And that's the director is Akagi Hiroaki and the studio is Shinei. And I said when BokuYaba was finally announced that I wonder if Shinei and Akagi would be involved in this because it just seems such a natural fit. So naturally, when that was announced, I was thrilled. They're a great fit for the material. Obviously, we dodged the Kaji Yuki bullet. Kyotaro is not being played by Kaji Yuki. The casting looks good. The previews look good. I know the source material is platinum. If you're not a fan of rom-com, maybe this will be the one to change your mind. I just think it's that good. The only thing I'll say in a cautionary note with BokuYaba is don't assume that you can assess what the series is based on the first couple of episodes because it does change quite a bit from what it is when it just starts out. It evolves quite a bit and the characters even more, which is fitting because they're 13 when it starts, and at that age we evolve tremendously. So again, I could probably do the whole 20 minutes on BokuYaba. I'm not going to do that, but just say I love it. Anna and Kyo, the two leads, are phenomenal. Yamada Anna, the female lead, is gorgeous, hilarious, has everything it takes to be a pure breakout star. And yet, in every popularity poll I've seen for the manga, it's Kyotaro, the male lead, who is the most popular character, which should just give you an indication of how phenomenal a character he is. This is great. To me, this is a can't miss with the staff that's behind it. In fact, as I record this, they're doing a preview screening in Tokyo of the first two episodes, and I'm debating whether I want to even look at the reactions to that or just go in cold and appreciate it without any prejudgments. We'll see. I may do that. Okay, I'm going to reluctantly move on, but not so reluctantly because the rest of that cop category is almost as phenomenal. We have Kimi wa Houkago Insomnia, Insomniacs After School, another terrific romance manga that I'm following. Not a rom-com, although it has funny moments, but more of a pure romance. This one is about a couple of kids in the astronomy club, the only two kids in the astronomy club, who happen to be insomniacs, which is how they meet in the first place. The boy is named Ganta, the girl is named Isaki. It's an incredibly beautiful manga in terms of the visuals. So maybe when Lead-In Films was announced as the studio here, maybe the manga fans didn't necessarily rejoice, but I think Lead-In Films has caused us to reassess who and what they are in the past year or so. They've really leveled up their game, which is good news for Rurouni Kenshin fans. I thought the Call of the Night adaptation was really, really top shelf, visually and narratively. This is another one that could be really eye-opening for a lot of people. It's not a super popular manga, but I think once people get familiar with these characters and this story, I think they're really going to bond to it. It's terrific. It's really good. The previews look fantastic. I think Leiden Films is up to the challenge. Um, so that's my number two pick of the season. Although honestly, once I got past Boku no Kokoro, I could have gone three or four different ways for my number two, and they had all been pretty much equal. The probably the top four or five series this season are all shows that could have been in any given season have been my top pick. And the next one of those is Tengoku Daimakyou, which is a another manga that I follow and have mentioned on my YouTube channel, as I did with Insomniacs as well. This one in English is Heavenly Delusion, and it is an adaptation of a manga by Ishiguro Masakazu, who is most famous probably in the West for Soredemo Machi wa Mawateru, uh, and Still the Town Moves, which had a probably my favorite Shaft adaptation of all time, but is also a terrific manga. And Ishiguro is one of those mangaka who's really, really beloved by other mangaka. And that's something that I look at as a pretty good tell that someone is really special when the others in his field really adore his work. Heavenly Delusion is very, very different from Sorimachi. It has funny moments, but it's dystopian science fiction, very dark, post-apocalyptic, weird, uh, can be very graphic, both in terms of sex and violence, and kind of really, really unusual violence and sex too. It's a strange one, but it really, really works. And the other thing I have to say about this adaptation is this one looks unbelievable. It's production IG, which by itself is usually an indicator of quality, but the previews for this look phenomenal. It's got a tremendous staff, including Kaneko Yuji as the art director, who's really one of the most notable and beloved art directors in anime. So I honestly don't know how people are going to respond to Tengoku Daimakyou. It's such a weird series, but it reminds me of some of those old school anime sci-fis of the 90s and the 2000s, and I think if you like that sort of series, this one has big potential for you. Next is another romantic comedy. This one is Skip to Loafer, another much beloved manga. This one in particular, I have not really followed the manga at all, but I know it has a great reputation. And this one is by PA Works, um, directed by Kotome Dei, who's who's a hit and miss director for me, but she has tremendous talent and is capable of a home run with the right material. She's doing series composition here as well. I think she's a good fit for this. I like PA Works when they go off their usual template visually, and I think the series kind of does that. It's a story about a country girl who goes to Tokyo and ends up going to high school there and meets a guy who's very different from her. Again, great reputation for the manga. Uh, Terrific looking previews. In some seasons, would no doubt have been my top pick going in, and I have very high expectations of this. Skip to Loafer, another rom com, another high pick. One of the things I noticed about this season is more so than most seasons that look good, it's not necessarily driven by sequels. It has sequels and some good ones, but the top four series are all non-sequels, which I think is really a good thing. But the fifth series, and the last one in my top category, is a sequel, and that's Mahoutsukai no Yome Season 2, which has shifted from Studio Wit to Studio Kafka, which is effectively a sub-studio, or at least a sister studio of Wit. It's part of the production IG port as they call it. It has the same director as the OVAs, which I think were very good. Different director from the first season, but that is Terasawa Kazuaki. And I fully recognize in looking back, it's been 5 years now, which is hard to believe, from the first season of Mahoutsukai. It has flaws, this series, no question about it, but it also has a something, an it quality to it that to me is undeniable. It's special, and it has a tremendous effectiveness in dealing with European folklore, especially from the British Isles, which is something pretty special about it. This season is sometimes called by manga readers Chisei Goes to Hogwarts, which should give you some idea thematically of what it is. I think we're looking at a pretty big shift tonally from the first season, but I'm going into it with an open mind, and I'm curious to see Chisei in that environment where she's more kind of flowering on her own. Although I know all the familiar faces will be here. Okay, so that's the top category, and I apologize for not going into more depth with those shows because I certainly could have, but I would have been here all day if I did. As I said, the mid table to me is possibly even more impressive than the highest expectations category. There are 9 shows in this category this season. Some of them, frankly, could have been in the top category, and I know it really shouldn't matter. I shouldn't grade on a curve where I place which tier I put a show in, but inevitably I do. I didn't need to stretch to put things in the top category this time, so stuff in the mid table. It starts with Tonikaku Kawai's second season. I mean, Tonikaku Kawaii a couple years ago was in my top 10. I mean, and no reason to expect any less from the second season. It's yet another rom com. One of the great things about this season is it has rom coms that's targeted with every age group. We have high school with Insomniac, Skip to Loafer. We have middle school with BokuYaba. We're going to talk about elementary school in a minute, and then we have Tonikaku Kawaii, which is about adults, young adults, admittedly, at least in his case, but married adults. I don't think we see a lot of series about. I don't think we see a lot of series about adult married couples, romance series, and so I think that's really interesting. I really like this pair. I think they're really a good couple. Even the supporting cast, which I didn't love originally, really grew on me quite a bit. It's another sign-in. 5 of the top 6 shows are sign-in this season. So Tonikaku Kawaii, it's mid-table. It could be top tier. No reason to expect anything but excellence from that. It should be another really good season. It's going to be intense to try to break the top 10 this year, but it's going to be there somewhere in that top 20 for sure. Next, we have that elementary school romance I was talking about, and that's Jio wo Shiranai Tenkousei ga Guigui Kuru. Properly translated in English, I would argue, as the clueless transfer student is assertive, although they have localized the anime specifically as My Clueless First Friend. I like the manga's localization much better. So preteen / elementary school rom-com is a tricky area. It's hard to do well. Clueless Transfer Student does it well. It's appropriately innocent and goofy. It's more driven by calm than rom, which is appropriate for the age of the lead characters, who are Akane and Tayo. Akane is the female lead, and she's someone who's derisively called the Reaper by her classmates and is somewhat bullied. And the bullying is it's a mostly comic, this series, so the bullying isn't super heavy, but it's not ignored either. And then the Tayo is the clueless transfer student, and the great thing is Tayo is a complete Chad, one of the biggest Chads you'll ever see, and he's totally blissfully unaware that he's being a Chad. He's just being himself. It's adorable. It's hilarious. And then actually my favorite character here is Daichi, who's one of their friends, who's the son of the ramen shop family, because he's just hilariously funny. It's a really charming and almost impossible not to like series, so I think this one is likewise a pretty, I would say, a pretty safe bet to be good. Next up is Ousama ranking Yuuki no Takarabako, and imagine Ousama ranking getting a sequel and it not even being in my top 5 or in the top tier, but it's a function of just how much the second core of the original series kind of tanked for me. Took some incredibly questionable directions, but that said, Wit did a fantastic job with the series. It looks gorgeous. It has a lot of love in it. I still love Boji, the lead. I still love Kage, his friend, the Shadow. The fun thing about this season is it's going to be anime original because there's not enough manga material for another season yet. So, given how rough it got in those last 6 or 8 episodes, especially, maybe that's not a bad thing. I'm very curious about this. It's got a pretty big range between upside and downside, but let's see where it goes. Ousama ranking was a definite anime of the year contender for the first half core for sure. How the Mighty Have Fallen. It's still almost placed in my top 10 just based on how great the first core was. But anime original, we'll see. Next, it's another sequel, Mix Meisei Story. Sort of a rom-com, more of a sports series. It's, of course, Adachi Mitsuru. An extremely popular manga in Japan, although little known in the West. A sequel to arguably, by depending on what measure you use, the most popular anime of all time, Touch. I don't put Mix on the same level as Touch. I don't certainly put it on the same level as Cross Game, which is Adachi's magnum opus, in my opinion. But it is good. It's a very good series. The adaptation is fine. It doesn't take any big leaps with the manga. It just it's a very kind of straight up adaptation. But then so is Cross Game, and that certainly wasn't a problem. It doesn't help that Kaji Yuki is cast as Toma, the lead, but it's still okay. We're gonna get 24 episodes again, just like the first time. I stopped following the manga at some point, but I have read most of the material that's going to be covered in this season, and I think it's just as good as the first season, maybe even a little better. So another series that I suspect in some years would push for a top 10 spot. I kind of doubt it will this time, but it's not impossible. Then we get to a couple of ones that are kind of newbies for me, but rather well known. First, Jigokuraku, which is Hell's Paradise, which is a adaptation of Kako Yuji's manga. Yet another Fujimoto assistant getting his own anime after Spy Family and Chainsaw Man, and another one with a chance to be pretty big. It's Mappa too. Everything is Mappa these days, it seems like. I don't know really anything about the manga, but I have a sneaking suspicion I'm really going to like this. It's about a ninja who's basically tired of killing and ready to die. He's been framed for a murder he didn't commit and sentenced to death, and he's okay with it. But fate kind of intervenes, and he goes on a journey. I don't know. It looks really good to me, this one. I don't have any hard evidence for that, apart from the fact that the manga gets good reviews, but I'm kind of expecting this to be... I'm not going to call it a sleeper when you have a manga as popular as this one, but it is one that I suspect could be a sleeper for me. Then we have Oshi no Ko, which is one of the most anticipated shows of the season and indeed the year. The manga is by Akasaka Aka, who did Kaguya-sama, which is hugely popular. Art is Yokotani Mengo. Absolutely a phenomenon, this manga. Won many awards, nominated for others, very, very popular, very well regarded on the aggregator sites, the review scores. I'm very curious about this. It's a weird premise. There's a gynecologist who's obsessed with a 16-year-old idol who's secretly pregnant, and he winds up delivering her babies and then getting reincarnated as one or something. It's actually premiering. It premiered yesterday in theaters with a 3-episode premiere. I haven't heard any feedback on that yet, kind of because I'm deliberately avoiding it. I didn't want to see any of that before the preview. Again, another one that for me has a huge upside to downside range because I have not read any of the source material. The art is lovely, I have to say, and people say that Akasaka his heart was much more into the writing with this than Kaguya, which I hope, because that one really kind of lost me after a couple episodes. It's Doga Kobo. They can do this sort of material well. Some fairly high expectations for this. Then another one I haven't read, but good expectations, well-regarded manga, Ao no Orchestra, another performing arts series. about a violinist who's given up the violin in anger after his parents got a divorce. His father is a concert violinist. He ends up being roped into instructing a Yankee, a delinquent girl on the violin, a bully. Lots of potential here. Kishi Seiji directing, Kakihara Yuko writing. That's a damn good pair. That could be a good one for sure. My Home Hero by Tezuka Productions. Another sign-in. This one is about a father who kills the Yakuza who's abusing and trying to extort his daughter. And then the Yakuza come snooping around to find out what happened after he hides the body. I am a little uncomfortable with vigilantism, and I have a bit of a worry about that. But at least it's another series. It isn't another series that romanticizes Yakuza into teddy bears, so it could be a bit of a wild card for me. And then last in this category is Yamada-kun to level 999 no Koi wo Suru, which is one of my sleeper picks for the season. Yet another rom-com. This one is about a gamer girl whose boyfriend cheats on her with someone he meets online in the game, and then she winds up getting hooked up romantically with someone from her party in her guild who's a high school kid who has no interest in real life romance. Lots of interesting things here. First of all, it's a shoujo romance. It's the only one this season and the only one I remember this year. It's directed, it's at Madhouse, which is really looking like they're stepping up their game in terms of taking up kind of prestige properties to adapt. And it's directed by Asaka Morio, who's probably the top dog at Madhouse these days. There is definite Chihayafuru look to this one visually. I'm interested. I'm very interested. This, like I say, this is a sleeper pick for me. This is a sleeper pick for me for sure. But I could be completely wrong. My sleeper picks, in all immodesty, are rarely wrong that much. But I have a vibe on this one. Yamada-kun to level 999. Okay. Whew. That's longer than my average preview, and we haven't even gotten to the modestly category, so I'm going to whiz through these. Kimetsu Season 3. I kind of like the second season better than the first. I stuck with Kimetsu to try to figure out what was going on, why it was so popular. I think I kind of did, and I wrote about that. I would normally probably cover this without too much doubt. As crazy as this season is, I'm not making any promises, but I'm expecting to stick with it. This is the Swordsmith Village art, Katana Kaji no Sato-hen. Otono no Ginga, Galaxy Next Door. To me, this is kind of an anti-sleeper vibe for me. It's a sign-in okay, but it reads like a sign-in that if you told an AI to create a sign-in manga, this is what it would spit out. It's a young mangaka with two younger siblings he takes care of. His parents are gone. The Genki girl assistant who changes his life when he's at his lowest ebb. I don't know. It could be that my anti-sleeper vibe is completely, my radar is off on this, and it'll be great. I have a little bit of a worry about a manic pixie dream girl syndrome here too, but I'll give it a shot. Mashle, pretty popular Shonen Jump manga. What I've read of it doesn't impress me. I kind of call it Mashle, but we'll see. Nothing else too much in this category that really lights me up. Maybe Megami no Cafe Terrace, about a guy who inherits his grandma's beach hut and is going to sell it, but there's 5 crazy girls living there. That has a tiny sleeper vibe for me. The Marginal Service just looks weird. Opus.COLORs looks kind of strange. It's maybe an sci-fi idol series, hard to say, but nothing in that category big time jumps out to me. Obviously, any Kimetsu series, if Touch is not the most popular anime of all time, if you use different metrics, then it's Kimetsu. So that's to be respected. Okay. Then we have one sort of or category, kind of its own box, which is Golden Kamuy 4th season, which is returning after going on hiatus. Originally aired in the fall, 4 episodes. Went on hiatus because of the death of a key staff member, which I have no idea what happened there. Obviously, thoughts and prayers with them, so to speak, but it's kind of a strange thing. I've never heard of that happening before, and we're all these months later, we still don't know who the person in question was. In any event, I've always kind of fantasized that Golden Kamuy and Vinland Saga would go head to head against each other, and it's finally happening. There are a lot of obvious overlaps between those two shows. The mangaka are good friends, they're mutual admirers. I kind of wish it wasn't happening in a season that was already so packed. Vinland and Golden Kamuy, two previous #1 overall shows for me, going up against one of the biggest seasons in living memory. That's going to be crazy. But I'm certainly looking to forward to having Golden Kamuy back. It will start from the beginning with the first episode, and then by the time we get into May, that's when we'll start getting into the unaired material. My will definitely blog list is 10 shows, and I can guarantee you in the end it's going to be more than that I cover. But 10, I had 8 in the fall, which, as I said, looked like it was going to be a huge season at the time we started. Only 1 last season on this list, and now we're up to 10, so it's whiplash time. I don't ever remember having double digits in my will definitely blog category. It's a very impressive group. And others will join it, I'm sure. My sleepers for the season, as I said, Yamada-kun is probably my #1 sleeper. And I would call Hell's Paradise. I would call that a sleeper, but it's just too popular to be a sleeper. Maybe it's a sleeper for me. And then I don't know, Orchestra probably is a bit of a sleeper too. That has the potential maybe to be an overperformer from where I have it ranked, I would say, which is 12th. Nothing at all in the OVA column. Kind of sad. That's the direction we've been headed with OVAs, but nothing at all in that category this season that I felt was worth covering. But it's not a bad season for it, all things considered. And then only one on the theatrical side, which is Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon Cosmos, the Sailor Moon movie. It's adopting something called the Shadow Galactic arc. I don't know enough about Sailor Moon to know what that is, but at this point, any Sailor Moon big screen release is kind of a big deal. It's a legendary series. And that, folks, is the spring 2023 season preview. And yes, it did end up being longer than I wanted, but with that many shows to talk about, it's not really a surprise. We'll see. On paper, like I said, they don't play the games on paper, but on paper, it looks like it has the potential to be, once or twice a decade, especially with the way the last decade has gone, type of a season. Absolutely jam-packed with material that's of interest to me. A great season for manga adaptation. I don't think there's any doubt that it's going to wind up being that. And hopefully, like I said, I even have hopes it could end up being the best season since the legendary spring 2012. We'll see, but it's not impossible. Thank you very much, as always, for sticking with me on for sticking with me on such a long video this time. As I said, I will link to the BokuYaba video in the description, as well as, of course, the actual written post on LIA. And if you like what you see, what you hear, of course, I would be very grateful if you'd like, comment, subscribe, as James May likes to say. I also want to remind you that I have a crowdfunding campaign going for the Best of the Naughties anime top 10 list, which is doing very well. That's linked on the website. You can contribute any amount you want. I'm hoping to raise enough money to do a fairly comprehensive top 10 list, but we've already reached the second tier of that, which is great. So that's going to be something coming up soon. Again, liking, commenting, subscribing is very much appreciated. I hope we both end up enjoying this season as much as it looks like we might. And for God's sake, watch BokuYaba, because I love that series to death. I love so many things on the docket this season, but BokuYaba is really, really special for me. So, on that note, I wish you all the best. I hope you have a great spring. And as always, I implore you, and this is something to really, really keep in mind as you go forward in your life's journey, stay frosty.